What if everything Roger Waters would eventually become? The towering rage, the wall built to separate himself from his own audience, the fascist rally staged in a stadium, the fury that would drive Richard Wright out of the band and finally tear Pink Floyd apart, was already there, fully visible, in one strange and beautiful and violent image from the very beginning. The image of a young man in his early 20s abandoning his instrument mid-song, striding across the stage and setting a gong on fire. This is not a metaphor I am imposing on the past from the comfort of hindsight. It is a real thing that Roger Waters really did, night after night, in the years just after Syd Barrett left the band. And it is one of the most revealing and least understood images in the whole early history of Pink Floyd. Because everyone who saw it remembers it as spectacle, as psychedelic theater, as a great piece of showmanship. And almost no one has noticed what it actually was, which is the first visible symptom of the rage that would, over the following 15 years, define Roger Waters, define Pink Floyd, and eventually destroy them both. This is the story of the flaming gong, and of why the instrument Waters chose to attack. Of all the instruments in the world, tells us exactly who he was becoming. Start with the ritual itself, because the primary accounts of it are vivid and consistent. And once you assemble them, the escalation is unmistakable. In the late 1960s, with Barrett gone, Waters developed what the band themselves called his party piece, a recurring stage ritual built around a large gong that hung suspended behind Nick Mason's drum kit. During the long, extended pieces of the era, above all the epic A Saucerful of Secrets and the mesmerizing Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun, Waters would leave his position, cross the stage, and attack the gong. And attack is exactly the right word. Mason, who watched it from his drum stool for years, described it with a precision that should stop you cold. He said Waters looked as though he were trying to wring the gong's neck, bent backward, teeth bared, head thrown back, extracting the maximum violence from the gesture. Another eyewitness said Waters, who was very tall and cut a strong figure, did some very strange things on that stage. This was not a musician gently marking a climax with a soft mallet. This was a young man assaulting an object with his whole body, with visible fury, and audiences and critics alike read it as thrilling theater, as the very definition of what psychedelic music was about. But look at how the assault escalated over time, because that escalation is the whole story. Because the mallet, it turns out, was only the beginning. The sources record that Waters attacked the gong with a widening arsenal of increasingly violent means, and the progression is genuinely startling when you lay it out. At the Queen Elizabeth Hall, in one of the band's early ambitious multimedia shows, audiences could watch Waters hurling potatoes at a great gong, an image so strange it sounds invented. A man throwing food at an instrument. In New York, at a small basement club early in the band's American career, the escalation turned bloody because Waters took to throwing glasses at the gong during Set the Controls, and the glasses shattered and cut his hands, so that he sustained nasty wounds, spilling his own blood on stage in the act of attacking the instrument, a habit Mason noted he seemed to be developing on American soil. A pattern of leaving his own blood behind. And then, at the climax of this whole escalating ritual, came the fire. At a benefit concert at London's Wembley Empire Pool in 1969, for the grand finale of Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun, they set Roger Waters' beloved gong ablaze. Follow the sequence. A mallet, then thrown potatoes, then thrown glasses that opened his hands. Then, finally, fire. This is not the trajectory of a stage effect being refined. It is the trajectory of an escalating assault. A young man attacking the same object with steadily more violent means over a period of years, until beating it was no longer enough and it had to be set alight. And a later account of the fully realized version of the ritual describes the band appearing to play inside a firestorm, the lights coloring the vapor yellow and orange, strobes firing sparks across the drums, while Waters, lit by a single white spotlight, abandoned his bass and lunged toward a giant gong that duly exploded into flame at the song's peak. The word the source uses is exploded. The gong did not glow or smolder. It exploded into flame at the climax every night. Now here is the question almost no one asks, and it is the question that unlocks the whole thing. Why a gong? Of all the objects Waters could have chosen for this ritual of escalating violence, of all the instruments he could have beaten and stoned and bloodied and burned, why did he choose that one? And the answer is not accidental. Because the gong is not a neutral instrument. In the whole vocabulary of orchestral and dramatic music, the gong, the great tam-tam, has one overwhelming symbolic meaning, and that meaning is the end. The gong is the sound of cataclysm, of doom, of the final blow, of annihilation. It is the instrument composers reach for when they want to signify death, apocalypse, the crash of worlds, the last trumpet. It is struck at the moment of catastrophe. A gong is not a sound you build with. It is a sound you end with. The single, overwhelming stroke that announces that everything is over. And Roger Waters, night after night, chose that instrument, the instrument of the apocalypse, as the object of his rage, and beat it, and stoned it, and cut his hands open on it, and finally set it on fire. He did not choose to burn a guitar, the instrument of the solo, of virtuosity, of self-expression. He did not choose to smash a drum, the instrument of rhythm and drive. He chose the gong, the sound of the end of the world, and he made it burn. There is a terrible fittingness in that choice that Waters himself may not have consciously understood, because the man attacking the instrument of apocalypse would go on to become the great apocalyptic voice of Pink Floyd, the writer obsessed with war and death and collapse, with the end of things, with the wall coming down and the world burning. And here, at the very beginning, before he had written any of it, the obsession is already there, enacted physically on stage, a young man setting fire to the sound of the end. And this is where the flaming gong stops being an anecdote and becomes a prophecy. Because the rage it expresses did not stay contained within the ritual. It grew, and it found new objects. And the trajectory is one of the clearest in all of rock. Consider the timing, which the sources make precise and which is everything. Mason noted that Waters developed this habit of attacking the gong specifically after Syd Barrett was gone. This matters enormously. Barrett was the founder, the leader, the genius who had defined the band and then disintegrated and been eased out. And his departure left Pink Floyd decapitated, leaderless, uncertain. And it left Roger Waters, in particular, carrying an enormous and complicated burden, the guilt of having abandoned a friend, the terror that the band might collapse without its visionary, the sudden pressure of a leadership vacuum he would eventually fill. And it is exactly at this moment, exactly when all of this lands on him, that the ritual of attacking the gong begins. The rage found its first object in the aftermath of losing Syd. Waters had a fury inside him, a fury that would turn out to be the defining engine of his entire creative life. and the flaming gong is the first place we can actually see it, discharged onto an instrument because it had, as yet, no other outlet. And from there, the line runs straight and unbroken. The rage that burned the gong would, a decade later, write The Wall, an album that is nothing but rage given architecture. The rage of a man so alienated from his own audience that he spat on a fan and then built a literal wall across the stage to separate himself from the crowd. The rage that burned the gong would drive Richard Wright out of the band during those very wall sessions. The rage that burned the gong would culminate in Waters, on stage, playing a fascist demagogue directing hatred at a stadium. The ultimate image of a man whose fury has consumed everything, including his own humanity. The flaming gong is The Wall in miniature, staged 15 years early, and no one recognized it, because it looked like nothing more than a brilliant piece of psychedelic theater. There is a reading of all this that is too easy, and that I want to resist, because it would be dishonest to pretend the fire was only pathology. Part of what Waters was doing was, straightforwardly, great theater. The early Pink Floyd were pioneers of the total live spectacle, of using light and smoke and volume and physical drama to overwhelm an audience. And a burning gong at the climax of a 12-minute cosmic epic is on any level a magnificent piece of stagecraft. Waters was a showman, and the fire was a show. But great art rarely comes from a single source. And the deepest theater is almost always powered by something real underneath it. And the thing underneath this particular piece of theater was rage, genuine and personal and enormous. The same rage that would later produce some of the most powerful albums ever made. This is the crucial point, and it is what makes the flaming gong worth understanding rather than merely enjoying. Waters was not faking the fury for effect. He was discharging real fury and discovering, in the process, that it was magnificent to watch, that his rage was, among other things, a form of genius, that the thing burning inside him could be turned into spectacle and then into art. The flaming gong is the moment Roger Waters first learned that his anger was his instrument, more than the bass ever was. The bass he abandoned to cross the stage, the gong he set on fire, and it was the fire, not the bass, that everyone remembered. So let me gather this together, because the flaming gong is a small image, and it deserves to be seen for the enormous thing it actually contains. In the years after losing Syd Barrett, Roger Waters developed a stage ritual of attacking a gong. And over time, that attack escalated. From a mallet to thrown potatoes to thrown glasses that cut his hands and spilled his blood to, finally, fire. A giant gong exploding into flame at the climax of the show. He chose, for this ritual of escalating violence, the one instrument in all of music that means the end of the world, the sound of apocalypse, and he made it burn. Everyone who saw it called it spectacle, and it was spectacle. But it was also the first visible eruption of the rage that would become the defining force of Pink Floyd, the rage that would right the wall and stage the fascist rally and drive out Richard Wright and finally destroy the band. And from within. The flaming gong is where Roger Waters' fury found its first object, and where he first discovered that the thing burning inside him could be turned into art. It is the whole future of Pink Floyd, its greatest triumphs and its final self-destruction, compressed into a single image and enacted a decade and a half before anyone could have known what they were watching. A young man walked away from his bass, crossed a smoke-filled stage, and set the sound of the end of the world on fire. And we thought it was just a light show. If you want the rest of this, the whole arc of Roger Waters' rage and what it built and what it burned, From that first flaming gong all the way to the wall he raised against the world that runs through my Pink Floyd dossier. And the link is waiting in the pinned comment. But the heart of this one is a single question hidden inside a single image. So I will leave you with it. When a young man, of all the instruments he could have chosen, chooses to set fire to the one that means the end of everything, is he giving us a light show? Or is he telling us, years before he has the words for it, exactly what he is going to become? Where art does not console, it autopsies.